your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to break down how Mikel Arteta won the pressing battle against Jurgen Klopp to help Arsenal claim all 3 points against Liverpool. When we break down the game, when we do look at the board, we have Liverpool in a 4-3-3 as expected, and we ended up seeing Mikel Arteta make a few adjustments to his 3-4-1-2. We saw Reiss Nelson and Nicolas Pepe up front operating as narrow forwards, and just in behind them was Lacazette. And the other key inclusion that we saw from Mikel Arteta was the reintroduction of Lucas Torreira to the starting lineup to offer more bite, tackling, and a defensive cover with Granit Xhaka ahead of the Arsenal backline. So when we do break down how Arsenal were able to claim all 3 points, the key theme here was their pressing. It was evident that Mikel Arteta had a plan to disrupt Liverpool from building out of the back and dominating that game. And what we ended up seeing was that he did have the 2 center forwards in Reiss Nelson and Nicolas Pepe pressing the center backs but blocking out the passing lanes into Roberto and Trent Alexander-Arnold. And then when you had Firmino trying to drop off deeper to get on the ball, Lacazette was stuck tight to him. That means in the midfield zone, you would have Xhaka and Torreira stepping to Oxlade-Chamberlain and Wijnaldum. And what he initially wanted was to have Saka and Tierney step out to Alexander-Arnold and Robertson to clog that midfield backline and ensure that they were forced to play long. However, although that energetic, aggressive press was successful in the early stages, all it took was a few modifications from Liverpool's attacking line to ensure that Arsenal had to find a different route to press. The main focus here was on Sadio Mane because initially he was looking to drop off into narrow positions to try and get on the ball, but Sadio Mane simply shifted out to the touchline to occupy Cedric, and that opened up a lane for Robertson to get on the ball. Now you could ask Nelson to do a dual role and shift out to Robertson and Van Dijk, but that would eventually tire him out. Now, obviously, you can't have Cedric step out into the path of Robertson and leave Mane with holding, but that's a big risk given the fact that there's so much space in that left channel that if Mane was able to receive the ball and run at holding, that would be an advantage for Liverpool. So the only other way to combat that would have Torreira shift over and then have Xhaka step out into the path of Wijnaldum, and if they're able to get that switch, then they would have to move quickly across the pitch to avoid being overloaded down the opposite side. Nevertheless, in terms of overall build-up play, Arsenal conceded very few chances, and it's because they were working across the pitch as a unit to help each other out to ensure that Liverpool wouldn't be able to bypass that press. For instance, there was a time where we ended up seeing Alexander-Arnold play a crossfield pass to Robertson. Cedric was pulled out and he was bypassed, so Mane received the ball ahead of holding. But we ended up seeing Reiss Nelson track back to help Arsenal cover those spaces. There was a time where we ended up seeing Robertson pushing forward to attract Cedric, and Mane shifted laterally into a pocket of space in that midfield zone, but Xhaka came across to sweep up danger. Later on, we saw more good work from Xhaka when we saw Saka press Alexander-Arnold a bit late, and that's where we saw Firmino drop off of David Luiz to look to receive the ball. But whenever Firmino looked to drop off into the midfield zone, David Luiz didn't step towards him, and that's where we ended up seeing Xhaka shift across to intercept Alexander-Arnold's loose pass. And there was one move in particular that epitomized Arsenal's great work out of possession. It stemmed through Nicolas Pepe pressing Gomez but blocking off the passing lane into Alexander-Arnold. We ended up also seeing Lacazette on Firmino, and we ended up seeing Xhaka step out into the path of Oxlade-Chamberlain with Saka moving towards Alexander-Arnold. What we end up seeing here is that Gomez is able to split Nicolas Pepe and Xhaka to find Firmino once again, dropping off David Luiz. But what ends up happening here is that when Firmino turns towards goal, Saka shifts away from Alexander-Arnold to make a vital intervention to ensure that Firmino can't play in Firmino or Salah breaking in behind. So while Arsenal's work rate, organization, and discipline was positive without the ball, when they were looking to build attacks, they struggled to bypass that Liverpool press. What you ended up seeing was that because they were in a back three, Liverpool were able to press from the front with ease. You had Firmino ahead of David Luiz, and then Mane and Salah looking to close down Holding and Tierney. But what we ended up seeing was that Liverpool were looking to shift Arsenal to the right-hand side and then try to have Wijnaldum to close down Cedric. Because what you ended up seeing here was that you had Salah blocking off the passing lane from Tierney into the path of Saka, so they never looked to try and play down that route with fear that that Salah would get the ball in a good goal scoring position. And David Luiz, when he tried to play long balls over Firmino, they were often overhit, or the Arsenal attacking player, specifically Reiss Nelson, was running offside. So what you ended up seeing was that you had that front three closing down, and you can have the fullbacks looking to step out to the wingbacks. But with Fabinho and Oxlade-Chamberlain closing down Xhaka and Torreira, that left Wijnaldum as that free man. There were times where you ended up seeing Mane dropping off of holding to try and block off that passing lane to Cedric. But the other times, that lane was open for Arsenal to try and play the ball out to him. But Wijnaldum would shift over just to ensure that Arsenal couldn't build forward. There was a time where that press nearly backfired when Lacazette shifted laterally into that zone and Holding ended up splitting Fabinho and Mane, but Robertson simply stepped in to dispossess Lacazette. There were times where we did see more gambling from Salah to try and dispossess David Luiz, but even if they were able to get the ball over to Tierney, then Oxlade-Chamberlain would shift out into his path, and then Fabinho and Wijnaldum would shift across to cover those spaces for Liverpool. And there was obviously the likelihood of Salah gambling toward David Luiz and Arsenal still persisting to shift the ball out to the right. That ended up seeing Firmino sit on Torreira. We had Wijnaldum instantly stepping out to Cedric, and that's when you ended up seeing Fabinho sitting on Lacazette, and Arsenal still struggled to build out of that zone. However, while Arsenal's pressing kept them in the game defensively, it was that same press that led to them taking the lead. What you ended up seeing was that Van Dijk was pressed by Nelson, and Lacazette stepped into the path of Fabinho, splitting the center backs, and Van Dijk's loose pass into the path of Lacazette saw him round Alisson to level the game. And minutes before halftime, once again it was Nelson stepping out to Alisson, and he played a loose pass into that gap between Van Dijk and Robertson, which saw Lacazette step into it. And with Pepe running across Gomez to take him out of the game, Lacazette was able to pull the ball back between Van Dijk and Robertson to find Nelson, and his finish completed the comeback. But when we look to the second half, we ended up seeing a brief resurgence from Liverpool stem through the fullbacks and Sadio Mane. Those two chances led to an Arteta triple change, and it ultimately shifted Arsenal's overall approach. Ceballos, Willock, and Aubameyang entered the game, and we ended up seeing Willock moving into that central role, and we ended up seeing Pepe on the left and Aubameyang on the right. At times we did see that aggressive press towards the center backs, but what ended up happening was that Arsenal dropped off deeper into more of a 5-4-1, and they had Aubameyang and Pepe now blocking off the passing lanes to the center backs, Willock on Fabinho, and then they allowed Van Dijk and Gomez time on the ball. Fabinho ended up dropping off a bit deeper to split the center backs, and they operated in deeper zones, but that simply meant that Willock could drop off a bit deeper, help Arsenal congest that midfield zone, and now Liverpool had problems finding space in those midfield areas and in the final third to combine with each other and get behind that Arsenal defense. So Arteta's decision to have Aubameyang and Pepe dropping off a bit deeper ensured that Arsenal had more players in their third to deal with the Liverpool threat, and ultimately that was the reason why Mane consistently dropped off deeper to get on the ball to try and create chances. That ultimately forced Klopp to turn to his bench, bringing on Naby Keita for more penetration and attacking verve, and Minamino. But the real threat here for them was Sadio Mane dropping off deeper. We ended up seeing him drop off of Aubameyang to receive the ball from Robertson, gain a yard, and then find Minamino running across David Luiz, but he flashed that shot wide. And later on in that game, it was once again Mane darting into space between Holding and Cedric to receive a ball from Robertson, but Maitland-Niles' pressure did force him into side netting. But when you really look at it, Arteta won the tactical battle here. Yes, Liverpool did create a bit more chances than Arsenal, but it was Arteta's pressing scheme that did help Arsenal stay in the game in that first half, and ultimately led to their 2 goals that won the game. When you look to the second half, Liverpool started great, but it was Arteta's tactical adjustments that had more players dropping off deeper to outnumber Liverpool in Arsenal's third, and then have more production out in those wider areas to try and limit the threat of Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. And ultimately, that was the difference maker here as Arsenal claimed all 3 points. Hi everybody, thanks for watching and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.